The right words can change the world. These lines from the science fiction novel Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card brings us a glimpse of what is happening around us and also defines the plan of action in a very vague way. Good afternoon, all of you. It gives me an immense pleasure to welcome you to an online session in the series of constitutional law webinars organized by Vasudev College of Law. On behalf of the institution, I would like to forward my warm greetings to our chairman, Dr. C.S. Joshi, our director, Mr. Gaurav Joshi, our esteemed faculty, and our guests, Mr. Shakti Singh, and our keynote speaker and guest of honor, Mr. Arvind Vashisht, Senior Advocate, High Court of Nainital. And I also want to welcome our guest and our audience. As we all know that since the advent of 2020, the world entered into a new era, an era of face masks, an era of social distancing, an era of lockdowns, and an era of control. An era which I would say, which I would be clear, which I think would be clearly remembered as an era of COVID-19 pandemic. Nation states were brought to its knees, the weapon of mass destruction were rendered useless. Everything stopped, like someone had hit the pause button. And all this because of a virus whose own living status is undetermined. Like every other country in the world, India was also hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, and government of India had to deal with the crisis that was ensuing upon them. Government of India did what every country had to do, that is closing down of the borders, screening at important and public places, sanitization, testing and tracing, and whatnot. The last arrow in the quiver of the government of India was a national lockdown, which they successfully implemented on 21st March. The government of India also invoked the legislative instruments of Disaster Management Act 2005 and and sparingly used archaic Epidemic Diseases Act 1897, which were used, which along with the set of guidelines provided by the high, which along with the set of guidelines provided by the ministries were used by government of various states and government of India to handle the crisis. In one way, we can say that the before mentioned legislations were the only piece of legislations that were available to government of India. If we look into the legislative history of our country, we'll figure out that to handle this sort of a crisis, we had almost no legislation. The states were given power by the help of Epidemic Diseases Act of 1897, which was passed in the colonial era. It was passed to handle the crisis of bubonic plague that occurred in Bombay. But nobody knew that we'll be struck by a crisis of the same nature again in some 100 years or 150 years. So in this online session, we would try to make a critical analysis of National Disaster Management Act 2005 and Epidemic Diseases Act 1897 in the purview of COVID-19 pandemic. This talk will be divided into three segments, where firstly our guest speaker, Mr. Shakti Singh, will be introducing the topic to us, along with me as a moderator, also presenting his views. In the second part of the in the second segment of the talk, we'll have our gracious presence of Mr. Arvind Vashisht, Senior Advocate of Nainital High Court, who will give a detailed analysis on the topic and will also present his wise words. And in the third segment, we will have a question answer session with our guest of honor and keynote speaker, Mr. Arvind Vashisht, where he'll try to answer the questions that have been put forward to him by the audience and moderator. The audience is requested to keep its mic and video off at all times. They can put their queries in the question box and queries and questions using the chat box on the screen. Kindly maintain the discipline. Now I would like to request Mr. Shakti Singh to take the stage and present us his wise words. Thank you.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for today's College of Law, especially Gavi sir. And I'm highly delighted that I've been sharing, dice today with one of the legendary advocates which we have in the High Court of Uttarakhand. I just welcome Arvind sir. I'm welcoming Chairman of Dr. Dev Law College, Dr. Chandrasekhar Joshi, and all the dear students. After me, it will be a detailed analysis of the act is concerned. I outline and tell you something that which you needs to understand that what is the complication of this act is concerned. So this disaster management act, जिसको हम कहते हैं आपदा प्रबंधन. So I just want to brush on the issue that the reason for which this act has come. As we all know, as a matter of record, it act came in 2005, and the reason for
Shakti sir,
enacting
can you switch on your camera?
So the reason for this act is, now I'm audible to all of you. So I just want to tell you the reason for act. A legislation can only become for a reason. Meaning thereby, if a parliament is enacting an act or a law is being laid down, so what is the reason behind that law? So first I'll tell you, just in 5 minutes, I'll tell you the reason behind drafting this National Disaster Management Act. As you all know, the act has came in 2005. But there are two or three main reasons for which this legislation has been drafted. The first reason was that in case if any disaster occur, if in case, so this act is a legislation of anticipation that if any disaster will come, then what are the steps which will be taken by the government in order to reduce the effect of that disaster. So this act is a preventive kind of a law that what prevention should be done at the time when disaster is being introduced. And as we all know, since this Disaster Management Act has been enforced in the state of Uttarakhand and is extended to all our country. So now with the enforcement of Disaster Management Act, there are some, shall I say, a complication has been developed. The complication with regards to the obligation, which are, the government authorities have an obligation to perform their duties with regard to the National Disaster Management Act. Now, first thing which needs to be noted, if any student they can note, there are three authorities in this act. One is National Disaster Management Authority, that is at national level, and one is State Disaster Management Authority, that is at state level, and the last authority will be District Disaster Management Authority. The National Disaster Management Authority is an authority which is headed by the Prime Minister, including 9 members. The State Disaster Management Authority is headed by the Chief Minister of the respective states and 8 members. And the District Disaster Management Authority is being headed by District Magistrate of a concerned district. Now, there is a National Disaster Management Institute also, which has came into the existence, and the work of this institute is to read, analyze in the relevant areas that if certain disaster will occur, then what should be the plan of action. So, as I told you, there are three authorities. National Disaster Management Authority is primarily work for making plans at the national level is concerned, and the State Disaster Management Authority makes plan with regard to the state, and District Management Authority makes the plan with regard to the particular district. But for example, if a fund is being made, in National Disaster Management Act, there is a National Disaster Fund is being. So how this fund is deployed? So at national level, all these policies have been made by the national, and it is to be deployed in the state by this State Disaster Management Authority, which is headed by the respective Chief Minister of the state, including 9 other members, including 8 other members. Now, there is one thing which is a catch in this act, that if anything is being done by opting the power of this act, it is not redressable. मतलब अगर इस एक्ट के तहत कोई भी अथॉरिटी कोई एक्शन लेती है, मान लो किसी का घर एक्वायर कर लेती है, if a house has been acquired, so when this Disaster Management Act is enforced in an area, so authorities have a right to acquire a house, authorities have a right to acquire a school for the purpose of fighting that particular disaster. So if there is any dispute, so that can only be redressable before a High Court and a Supreme Court. मतलब अगर कोई डिस्प्यूट होता है नेशनल डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट एक्ट में, कोई अथॉरिटी अपनी पावर्स को एक्सरसाइज करती है, तो वो डिस्प्यूट एक्सक्लूसिवली हाई कोर्ट और सुप्रीम कोर्ट में कर सकते हैं. एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीज इसके बाद मैं विराम दूंगा आपको कि दिस एक्ट हैज अ ओवरराइडिंग इफेक्ट. The overriding effect, because this act is exclusively made for the sake of preventing the disaster. So whenever Disaster Management Act is applicable in any state, and if any law which is inconsistent, which conflicts So then the provisions of National Disaster Management Act will be applicable. So it has an override kind of one. So let me give an example. If suppose government goes to a school and government will take over that school for the sake of providing medicine. So thereafter, if an authority comes and question that action, that no, you cannot store medicines because you need a medicine license, you need a pharmaceutical license. So that will not do, because in Disaster Management Act, the power of making rules is with the authority. The time when this act is enforceable in the state. So the moment Disaster Management Act is enforceable in the state, it has an overriding effect. So authorities have a right to do that. So by these words, it's a brief. I just wish you all to read the act, because as far as this pandemic situation is concerned, it also has a kind of an obligation. Obligation means that authorities have the authorities are meant to perform their duties with regard to serving the citizens, and there is a penalty if any authority or any person who is deploying the obligation of National Disaster Management Act. If they will not do that, there is a provision of punishment, and punishments are proposed from 1 to a maximum of 2 years. If suppose somebody misappropriate the fact, if suppose somebody take benefit of any scheme by giving false representation, or if any of the department authority will not do their work as they meant to do. So in case of neglecting the duty, the action will be taken against the head of department of that particular department. That is a point to be noted. And all these words, the speaker after me is a legal giant, and he will elaborate all of you on these issues of national disaster management on a great detail. So by these words, I'm so thankful to Vasudev College of Law, Gandhi sir, and I would also like to extend my congratulations to Arvind Vashist sir. And with these words, I just, as a matter of, shall I say, as a matter of a notice, or as a matter of a, caution words, that be safe and maintain the guidelines which has been issued by the government of India. And these are tough times. And we have to be much more cautious. We have to be much more responsible, and we have to be much more, safe. That is the only reason we can overcome this problem. So, why these words? Thank you very much, students. Mr. Gandhi, over to you now.
Gandhi sir, your mic is off.
I am very thankful to Mr. Shakti for presenting his words. It was an immense joy to have him here. But I know the people are waiting for our keynote speaker to come in and give his wise words, but they have to settle for me for some time. I'll. I'm sorry to Arvind Vashist sir to make him wait for a little while more. But good things come at the end. Nah. Good things come at final point of the time. So I'll continue with this small points that I wanted to bring forward in respect to this National Disaster Management Act and Epidemic Diseases Act. So what I would see presenting these words from me, that when the COVID-19 disaster or COVID-19 pandemic struck upon us, almost no country was able to figure out what had actually happened. Though many African countries, along with many other European and Indian states, had the experience of dealing with the epidemic, but that experience was very small and was confined to only a set of small experiences that they had. We had seen in past the rise of MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. We had seen the rise of SARS. We know SARS was severe acute respiratory syndrome. And along with that, we had several outbreaks of Ebola and Zika virus in Africa. And one of the states that was constantly in, like one of the Indian states that was able to, like that was always there handling this sort of problem was Kerala, which was able to get those particular epidemics in the state as well. But no state or no country in whole was ready for any sort of a situation that would be called a pandemic. So how does a pandemic, like what is a pandemic and what it does to the nation structure? The pen some This is the era of globalization. After 1991, India was also successfully integrated into the global markets, and we were the part of the global supply chain as one of the biggest consumers and also as the one of the biggest suppliers. But this global transaction that was happening all throughout the last century was struck by the disaster called COVID-19. All the planes were stopped, all the transactions that were happening globally stopped. The movement of people was also confined to the extent that they were not allowed to move outside their homes. So the situation that came forward in front of the national structures was very grim, and almost they left nations out of no idea. So one of the things that all the developed nations did was implementing a national lockdown. You to implement, like implementing a national lockdown means that all the units are closed and people are asked to stay at home. But this national lockdown has its own implications, and it needs legal instruments to work as well. One cannot just come out and say that there is a national lockdown. You need to have a proper executive machinery, a functioning administrative machinery, also healthcare and other departments that should function so that a lockdown is successful. The government of India and the state governments in India had two major pieces of legislation to deal with this crisis. One piece of legislation was called Disaster Management Act 2005, which was passed after the Indian Ocean tsunami. We remember that in 2004, one of the biggest disaster that struck the Southeast Asian region was Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004. It left a lot of people for dead and a widespread destruction. And this brought all the governments, including ours, to its feet, and we realized that we need to have a proper disaster management plan to deal with these sort of crises. As one of the political philosopher called Slavoj put this, that COVID-19 is just not a simple pandemic. It is a dress rehearsal for other disasters that are coming in front of us. This, in the same way, the tsunami was treated by government of India, and we were able to bring out a legislation called Disaster Management Act of 2005. This act this act was an act which tried to provide a nationwide plan for how to deal with the disaster effectively. This particular act provided for state disaster management authorities and national disaster management authorities to be established at both national level and state level, and certain sort of budget allocations were made in this regard as well. Also, national disaster management was included as part of the curriculum of students at various universities and schools. We were able to see drills being organized. We were able to see uh, in the later stages when cyclones like Cyclone Amphan was striking India. This act was this act came in handy to deal with those sort of problems. Also, in respect to the pandemic or epidemic, we had no such act. We had, since the passing of the constitution, we might have seen a small outbreak of diseases here and there, but one cannot say that we had this COVID-19 situation ever after the constitution was enacted. So the government did not pay any heed to this particular point. In fact, the blame cannot even be put upon the government of India only, because many modern nations along with UK, US were also given critical warnings about some sort of epidemic or pandemic that would come upon us. I was reading in one of the books, or one of the books that I came through this season, that on pandemic only, that in during Obama administration presented him with certain sort of tickers, like certain sort of a report where Obama was supposed to look into the problems that they would be facing in future. The first thing that they mentioned was that there might be a virus outbreak, and then global change, climate change, and global warming and everything. And in the last, you would see political terrorism and those sort of options. So bureaucrats, health officials have been loud about the sort of virus outbreak that we are seeing, and they have been loud about it in the whole 21st century. But the problems with our government was that they did not pay any heed to these warnings. They were not listening to people when they were speaking. So effectively, we had no legislation or no particular law to deal with this sort of problem. The only legislation that we had in this regard was Epidemic Diseases Act of 1897, which was passed during the bubonic plague that struck Bombay. So one can imagine that an act which is a century old has now come to our rescue to tell us what to do. these these both the acts, as I told you, that National Disaster Management Act was a central act that allowed the central government to uh, allocate disaster funds and effectively manage a disaster. But the Epidemic Diseases Act was an act that was in the hand of state governments, and which would become a tool in the hands of state government to properly deal with this crisis. This Epidemic Diseases Act had not more than five or six sections that would provide state government with immense executive power, with immense administrative authority in regard to dealing with the disaster. The state governments would have power to put lockdowns, put curfews. We would see state governments having power to go for testing, and at some times invading the privacy of citizens. And this particular act, as in altogether, was the only solution that was available to us. But after the first wave that had struck us, we were able to point out many critical points where we are seeing that this act was failing us, where we were seeing that we didn't have enough resources to deal with the disaster, where we were seeing our federal structure collapsing. So I would like to point towards only a couple of fractures or couple of critical points that I was able to see. One of the main points that I was able to see a problem in was the waning away of federal spirit during this time. The India is a federal country. We all know our powers have been divided between center and state. But with when Disaster Management Act was put in, it effectively meant that all the control of resources was handed over to central government, and central government had a total say over what to do and what not to do. And still we are seeing the same problems occurring when we are listening various state governments complaining to central government about allocations that are made to them in respect to vaccines or oxygen or beds or ventilators or whatever be the case. So one of the biggest problem that we were facing was the waning of federal spirit, the large centralization of power in the hands of central government. But as we all know, the second wave still struck us. So that was not an effective solution. The second main critical point that I was able to see was that these acts took away a large scope of judicial intervention. In the first lockdown, we were able to see that almost no courts were functioning for a large part of lockdown. We had we had no access to justice in that regard. Only few courts which had effectively good digital digital connectivity, or if it had a good infrastructure, those courts were only functioning. The justice delivery system at the lower level had almost faced a crisis back then. So the people had no refuge. During the same time, we were also not able to see any coordination between the states. They say that when a crisis ensues upon us, it also does another thing. It does not, like, I would quote Jurgen Habermas here. He said that whenever a crisis ensues upon us, whenever a epidemic ensues upon us, it does not teaches us only about the virus. It also teaches us about the people, and it also teaches about us about what we don't know. With the advent of COVID-19, we were able to find out that we didn't have good legal structure, good administrative machinery to deal with this sort of a crisis. We were not seeing that people were coming together, or there was minimum coordination between the states. Today, when we are sitting safe at our homes, we are seeing our compatriots fighting and gasping for air. And in during that time also, I would say courts are playing a commendable, a very, I would say commendable role, a beautiful role that they should be playing while dealing with this crisis, especially Delhi High Court, which went to sitting till 10 o'clock to handle the crisis of oxygen shortage in various hospitals in our capital. Same can be said about the Supreme Court, though people might have conflicting views, but Supreme Court also came to the rescue and took the suo moto cognizance of the oxygen shortages and the shortages of various other life-saving drugs. So today, when we are having so little, we need not confine ourselves. We need to come together. We need to bring forward our ideas so that we are able to deal with this sort of a crisis. And as I already told you, that this is not the end. We might even see more similar sort of problems coming to us in later times as well. So we need to be well prepared. So I'd like to now request our esteemed speaker and our keynote speaker and our guest of honor, Mr. Arvind, to step in. I'll give a brief introduction of Mr. Arvind before he switches on his camera and grace his presence. Mr. Arvind Vashist is a practicing lawyer at Nainital High Court who has an experience of more than 24 years. He was designated a senior at Nainital High Court in 2014, and since then has contributed in various important cases that the High Court had to face. He has He has been he has been an Assistant Solicitor General of India for Uttarakhand at during his tenure for Truth from 2006 to 2009. He was a standing counsel for Income Tax Department in High Court of Uttarakhand. He was also a standing counsel for Central Excise Department at High Court of Uttarakhand. He was a public prosecutor for CBI. He was a standing counsel and nodal officers for UPSC in Uttarakhand. And there are many more accolades that I can count upon him. But the most important asset that we can take away from him is his words, his knowledge. So I would now request Mr. Arvind to switch on your camera and grace us with his presence. Mr. Vashisht, kindly bless us with your wise words. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to my fellow students. I feel thankful, and I want to convey my thanks to Mr. Shakti and Mr. Gandhi for speaking these good words for me. Now the broad framework has already been discussed. Broad framework of the Disaster Management Act 2005 has been given to us by Mr. Shakti and now also by Mr. Gandhi. But before coming to the provisions of this Disaster Management Act 2005, for which the Apex Court has very recently said that it's a complete code within itself. In the matter of a small scale industries, industrial manufacturer, which was a case relating to interest and compound interest on the payable by industries. The Apex Court said in paragraph 156 that it's a complete code within itself. But then before describing what the complete code says, I'll go back to the framing of the act itself. As the speakers who have spoken before me have said that there was no background, there was no idea of what the epidemic is and how to deal with these kind of disasters. But then on 26th of December 2004, that tsunami disaster struck the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and then the central legislature framed this Disaster Management Act 2005. Simultaneously, there was another exercise which was going on in the state of Uttarakhand, and the state of Uttarakhand framed Uttarakhand Disaster Mitigation Management and Prevention Act 2005. Perhaps this act has not been noticed that much, but this act was framed in 2005 and by the legislature of the state of Uttarakhand, which was notified on 11th of December 2000 to the 11th of November 2005. So we have now at least two acts, two laws dealing with disaster management and its mitigation. One framed by central legislature and another enacted by state of by the state legislature, that is the legislature of the state of Uttarakhand. Now this will induce a question: how can and under what circumstances these two legislature can have framed these two enactment? The point to be noted is that there is a scheme of distribution of powers in our constitution, as Mr. Gandhi said, that there is a federal structure. In our federal structure, central legislature has power to enact laws on some articles, some entries mentioned in Schedule 7 referable to Article 247 of the Constitution of India. And then state legislature has power to enact laws on on other points, on other entries, and then there is a concurrent list. Now there is an entry in concurrent list. This is entry number 23, which deals with social security and social insurance, employment and unemployment. Referring to this entry, this 2005 Act was enacted. 2005, the Central 2005 Act, that is Disaster Management Act 2005, was enacted by Central Legislature. And since the subject is in concurrent list, the state of Uttarakhand is also empowered to frame a law, and that law is Uttarakhand Disaster Mitigation Management and Prevention Act 2005. Though there is a constitutional limitation when a central act is working, that the provisions of a state act cannot be in derogation with or cannot be repugnant with the provisions of a central act, and therefore this is the central act which will prevail. And even if despite that being the position prevailing from the constitution, there is a specific provision in section 72 of this Disaster Management Act, the Disaster Management 2005, which says that the provisions of this act shall have effect notwithstanding anything inconsistent therewith contained in any other law for the time being in force or any instrument. So this 2005 Act of the Central Legislature, for all practical purposes, will be the act which will hold the field. Reference to another act has also been made. That another act is this Epidemic Disease Act 1897. This act was 1897. This act came into being. The provision, this act has only 4 provisions. Previously, this was Governor General in Council who was empowered to perform all duties, to discharge all of his powers under the Act, under Section 2, which has now been conferred upon state government. This amendment came in 1937. That is even before our Indian independence. But the state legislature, state government were given power to enforce the Act. One of the provision which says is section under Section 2A of that Act, the central government has power to issue orders. Then under Section 2, the state government has power to issue orders. And then all relevant provision is Section 3, which says any person who disobeys any regulations or order passed under that Act, that is 1897 Act, shall be prosecuted in accordance with Section 188 of the Indian Penal Code. So all lawful orders which have been passed under these acts can be enforced by way of taking recourse to the penal provisions, which is contained under Section 3 of the Epidemic Disease Act. And then there is another set of provisions which is contained in this the Central 2005 Act, and this will be there in Chapter 10. Chapter 10 of the Central Disaster Management Act 2005, which provides for punishment for obstruction. Then there are Section 51, Section 52, Section 53, and then there are another set of penal provisions which will operate even against the departments of the government. So even departments of the government can be brought to the charges, and the officer in charge of the department, the provision says that committed the department of the government, the head of the department shall be deemed to be guilty of the offense. So even if a direction which has been issued by an appropriate authority under the Disaster Management Act is obeyed by government departments, even head of the department of those government departments can be proceeded against penally, and therefore this provision has to be adopted. Because you'll see very recently when the oxygen distribution orders have been passed, there are reported instances. There are instances where these orders are being flouted or being disobeyed, but it's not that the Act authorities created in the Act are toothless tigers and they cannot enforce it. So coming to the 2005 Act, the word disaster, the term disaster has been defined. It has been defined under Section 2D. It has a reading of the definition will be of not much use, because a number of technical terms have been involved in it. But then in the definition is wide enough to control any kind of disaster and catastrophe, mishap, calamity, or grave occurrence in the area. Though word epidemic has not been used very specifically under clause D, but then by the effect of it, the exhaustive definition, a very exhaustive definition which has been given in this, all encompassing definition given under section 2D, the epidemic will be controlled in it. Then the national, one thing will be clear in addition to it, that a national plan has been formed by the appropriate authority, and that the national plan controls epidemic words also. So therefore, even if there is a epidemic or a pandemic like one which we are facing today, it will be covered within the meaning of disaster as given under section 2D of our Disaster Management Act 2005. Now, referring to the definition of disaster, which is occurring, which occurs in Uttarakhand Disaster Mitigation Management and Prevention Act 2005, is relevant at this point of time, because the word disaster has been defined in under this act also. This is defined under section 2A of the Uttarakhand Act, the Uttarakhand Disaster Mitigation Management and Prevention of 2000 Act. And besides saying that it means a catastrophe, calamity, mishap, a grave occurrence being natural or otherwise, which causes human suffering, distributions, etc. It also refers to a schedule which is attached with the act. And under the schedule, there are 5 kinds of disasters which have been mentioned. The first is water and climate related disaster. The second one is the geological related calamities. Third is chemical, industrial, nuclear disaster. Fourth is accident related disaster. And the fifth is biological disaster. Then under the head of a biological disaster, human and animal epidemics has been specifically given. So within the meaning of disaster, this epidemic can be is covered. There cannot be any doubt regarding this. But this is Small Scale Industrial Manufacture Association 2021 Supreme Court judgment also considers the provision of Uttarakhand. No, not Uttarakhand. Considers the Central Disaster Management Act 2005 considers a complete scheme of the Disaster Management Act 2005 and has considered it appropriate to issue certain directions regarding mitigation of sufferings and interest, etc. Referring to this judgment will perhaps be beyond our scope of this discourse. Now, the 2000 Act, this 2005 Act is divided into 11 chapters. Now, 11th chapter really is a miscellaneous provision which will deal with at the end of our submissions, at the end of our disclosures. The first chapter is National Disaster, is regarding the National Disaster Management Authority. Mr. Shakti has pointed out that the National Disaster Management Authority is to be constituted under the Act. This is constituted under Section 3 of the Act. Then under Section 3 of the Act, our Prime Minister or Honorable Prime Minister will be the ex officio chairman of this National Disaster Management Authority. And in addition to this, the chairman, there are other members to be appointed in accordance with that, but they will not be more than 9 members. Not more than 9, so it is an authority which consists of 10 persons with our Prime Minister, with our Honorable Prime Minister as ex officio chairman of the authority. Now the powers and functions are given under Section 6 of the Act. A detailed list has been given. It will be useless referring to these provisions. We can go through with this, but then when it will be relevant, I'll point out. Then one specific clause under this act says that chairperson, this is clause subsection 3 of section 6, which says chairperson of the national authority shall, in case of emergency, have power to exercise all or any of the powers of the national authority. But exercise of such power shall be subject to ex post facto ratification. So in case of immediate exigency, the chairman, that is Honorable the Prime Minister, can exercise powers of this complete National Disaster Management Authority himself, which is subject to the ex post facto, that is the rectification afterwards by the national authority. Then there is a national executive committee which is formed under section 8 of the act. We are, as I have said at the beginning of this part, that we are referring to chapter 2 of the act. This constitution is provided, constitution of the national executive committee is provided under section 8 of the act. Now we can consider these provisions simultaneously along with the provisions relating to state. The state part is chapter 3. So first part, when section 3 says in chapter 2, establishment of National Disaster Management Authority. Section 14 says, section 14, which falls in chapter 3, says establishment of a state disaster management authority. So here the Prime Minister is the ex officio chairman, and there the Chief Minister is the ex officio chairman. And with similar emergent powers are given to the state authorities. That is the ex officio chairman of the state authority. Then there is, as I said, that there is a provision of Constitution of National Executive Committee in section 8. There is a similar provision which says powers and functions of the Constitution of a State Executive Committee, which is section 20. So the constitution is provided under this act, and then there is one very important provisions. There one set of important provision which has been given in both parts, that is chapter 2 and chapter 3. So structurally, chapter 2 and chapter 3 provide for structures, powers, and functions of these committees with the relevant provisions relating to relevant positions relating to the ex officio chairman and members. The constitution has been provided under both acts. Then the act says the second part of the act, that is the part which relates to constitution at national level, under section 12 and 13. 13 provides guidance for minimum standards of relief. These are minimum standards of the relief. These relief which are provided under section 12 are minimum standard. That is, the state can provide relief more than this, but these are minimum standard. And this is then when national authority recommend guidelines for minimum standards for relief to be provided to the persons affected by the disaster, which shall include. So this minimum should be the minimum requirement to be provided in the relief camp in relation to shelter, food and drinking water, medical cover and sanitation. In the after tsunami, there was some kind of litigations regarding these shelters, when these shelters which were provided were not having toilets and basic human necessities were missing. So the litigation was there. But then in 2005, this has specifically come up. Shelter, food, drinking water, medical cover and sanitation facilities should be there. Then a special provision to be made for widows and orphans, ex gratia assistance on account of loss of life to be given. Then relief in loan repayment. The central government can also, that is the national authority, not central government. The national authority may in suitable case of disaster disaster of severe magnitude recommend relief of payment and loans. Section 11 speaks about national plan. That is, national plan has to be drawn up for which has to include, as per clause 3, measures to be taken for prevention of disaster. Now we'll have to consider this provision of national plan, which is contained in section 11 with the provision of the state plan, which will show how the machinery under the act will work and operate. So section national plan says measures to be taken for prevention of the disaster or mitigation to be effect. Measures to be taken, broad outlines. Measures to be taken for the integration of mitigation measures in the development plans. Measures to be taken for preponderance and capacity building to effectively respond to any threatening disaster situation or disaster. Then role and responsibilities of different ministry, etc. So national plan has to contain this. A national plan is in place, which we can find easily on the net. It is available on the World Wide Web. Then section 23 of the state plan. Section 23 of the state plan says the state plan shall include, clause 4, I'm referring clause section 23, subsection 4. This says it should include the vulnerability of different part of a state to different form of disasters. So since we are, Earth is a large country, now there are some of the areas situated near shore where tsunami can affect, but there are other areas in the hills like our state of Uttarakhand, situated in the hills, where the disaster, that is natural disaster, can be of a different kind. Though this current pandemic is similar globally with its natural variant, but then it is a virus generated pandemic. But then disasters can be different, of different kind. There can be an area which is earthquake zone, and the disaster can be caused by earthquake. A disaster can be caused by floods, but then flood can occur only where the rivers are there. So therefore, considering the topography, considering the nature of disaster which can hit the state plan has to be devised differently. So therefore, clause A says voluntary vulnerability of the different parts of the state to different form of disaster. So even within a state, there can be different form of disasters. Therefore, the which part is vulnerable to what kind of a particular disaster, this state plan has to state. Then measures to be adopted for prevention and mitigation of disasters, depending upon kind of disaster. Measures has to be contained in plan. Manner in which mitigation measure shall be integrated with the development plans and projects. So these powers, depending upon duty in the structure of the act, duty of the state authority in the within the wireframe of the act, different kind of duties have been given. Then the next chapter is chapter 4, which is chapter 4 is District Disaster Management Authority. Chapter 2 deals with the national authority. Chapter 3 deals with the state authority. Chapter 4 deals with the state authority. Now, Constitution, section 25. Now, in addition to collector, the clause 2 says elected representative of the local authority shall be called. So, ex officio chairman is collector. Then, elected representative of the local authority. Local authority has been defined under the act, and which says local authority under section has been defined under section 2H. Include Panchayat Raj institutions, that is village panchayats, municipalities, district bodies, cantonment boards, town planning authority, Jila Parishad, or any other body or authority by whatever name called for the time being invested by law for rendering essential services or with the control and management of the civic services. So the another member will be co-chairperson. Here the difference is at the district level there is a chairperson and then co-chairperson ex officio who is elected representative of the local authority. So considering wireframe of the act at the grassroots level, an elected representative of the local authority has been included so that a person who is exactly aware of the local situations, local problems may also be there in the at the time of managing and mitigating the effect of disaster. Then powers have been defined, meetings, etc. The third chapter, and a district plan, and then a district plan has to be constituted under section 31. National plan at the national chapter, national level, state level, state plan, and district plan, which is at a particular point of time, and the objectives are that the prompt respect to the disaster and relief may be given. Now, another object will be procurement of essential goods locally available may be secured easily, as in our oxygen situation nowadays. A district plan, fully implemented district plan, a district authority will be aware in which part of the district the oxygen or the medicines can be secured more conveniently. Then chapter 5 says the powers, contains powers of the central government to take measures. Now, after all these plans, thus subject to provisions that the central government shall take all measures deemed necessary or expedient for the purpose of disaster management in particular without way. Now, in exercise of these powers, section 35 and section there is another provision which occurs in the different chapter of the Act, that is chapter number 11 of the Act, section 65, which is power to requisition resources, provisions, vehicle, etc., or rescue operations. The government the national authority can issue directions, and national authority has issued directions relying upon section 10 subclause 2, relying upon its power under section 10 subclause 2 and section 65, and distributing oxygens and other resources. Then this provision, after this, the we are referring to national, yes, this central government's power. And then the important chapter is national chapter number 8, a national disaster response force, NRDF, the NDRF. That is a special force which has to be created in the Act at the time of earthquake and other disasters, or you can see that national disaster response force working on the spot. Though as of now, because since it's a medical emergency, a different kind of workforce is required, which is already working. Then section 50, which occurs in the same chapter, that is chapter 9, which occurs in chapter 9, which relates to finance, accounts, and audit of the audit. There are powers with the emergency procurement and accounting. So the goods which are required urgently can be obtained. This says, the provision says, where by reasons of the threatening disaster situation or disaster, the national authority or state authority or the district authority is satisfied that the immediate procurement of the provisions or material or immediate application of resources are necessary for the recourse to relieve, it may authorize the concerned department. So emergent procurement can be done under section 50, which shows that there are enough power for emergent enforcement. Then chapter 9, chapter 10 is offense and penalties, which the punishment, section 51, punishment for obstruction. If lawful orders passed by central authority or the state government or persons authorized by the national authority or the state authority or disaster authority in the discharge of their function under this Act refuses to comply with any directions, clause B, issued by the central government, shall be on conviction punishable with a term which may extend to 1 year. So the section 51 directions have been directions of the central government, state government, national authority, state authority, or even district authority are not complied, then it is a punishable offense under section 51. And then punishment for false claim. Mr. Shakti refers to this. A false claim is lodged before an authority. It is not sustainable, but a claim is lodged that somebody want to seek any relief, assistance, repair, reconstruction, or benefit consequent to the disaster. He can put up a claim, but if a false claim is laid, he can be prosecuted in section 52. Then 53 is punishment for misappropriation of money and material. Money and material urgently required or you to be used can be punished here. 53. Then false warning, punishment for false warning. Whoever circulate false alarms. So particularly in the reference of the social media reports, social media alarms which are created, this section 54 is relevant. Under section 54, whoever fakes circulates a false warning as to disaster or its severity or magnitude leading to panic, be punishable. It is also punishable with 1 year. So enough teeth given under the Act. Then section 55, as I referred earlier, offense by department of the government, head of the department can be held responsible. Though in the case of 55, there is an additional protection given under section 59, which says previous sanction of the government will be required, which says that no prosecution for offense punishable. 55 and 56 shall be instituted except with the previous sanction of the central government or the state government, as the case may be. So then with previous sanction, this can be initiated. This section has been added to protect the public servants from unnecessary litigation. When public servants are working for enforcement, for the enforcement of this Act, for disaster, for mitigation of miseries, for rescue or for providing other amenities under the Act, they may be given a certain kind of protection. Therefore, Section 59 has been added. Then, if somebody fails to on duty or his connivance at contravention of the provisions of this Act, Section 56 is maintainable. Offense is there under Section 66. Even for companies who fail to comply order, Section 58. It says that officer and was responsible, officer who was in charge, the person who was in charge, any person who at the time of offense was committed was in charge and was responsible to the company for the conduct of the business of the company will be responsible. So companies for which the companies, it is said, because the companies don't have physical bodies, but somebody is to be held responsible if an offense is committed. Therefore, the person who is in charge can be held responsible here. Then cognizance part. A cognizance of any offense can be taken not anybody's complaint, but on the complaint of certain persons only. These are national authority, state authority, central government, and state government. So the another protection has been given against false prosecution, so that responsible person only can be prosecuted. Now, one more important one, the next, that is chapter the last part of this act is chapter 11, which contains some specific and important provisions. Section 61 is prohibition against discrimination. Now you will refer Article 14 and 19. Immediately we can compare with Article 14 immediately. Prohibition against discrimination. While providing compensation and relief to the victims of the disaster, there shall be no discrimination on the ground of sex, caste, community, descent, and religion. So a protection has been given that all caste and creed across the society will be entitled to the benefit and protections of the to be extended by provisions of this act. Then powers of frames, rules, etc. 62 and 63. So this payment of compensation, section 67, the resources of any person, that is residential houses, cars, etc., they can be requisition. This is an important provision which says if it appears to the National Executive Committee, State Executive Committee, as likewise national authorities to be are constituted, the National Executive Committee, State Committee, and District Authority are to be constituted for enforcing the act. If they feel that any resources with any authority or any person are needed for the purpose of prompt response, any premises needed or to be likely to be needed for the purpose of rescue operations, or any vehicle is needed to or is likely to be needed for the purpose of transport of resources from disaster affected area or transport of resources, such authority may by order in writing requisition such resources. So such requisitions can be requisitions by the appropriate authorities, though subject to payment of compensation, which is contained under section 66. For requisition of these resources, they are entitled to have some compensation. For procedure determination, how it is to be determined, is under section 66 of the Act. Now, section 71 contains a provision which says that bar of jurisdiction of the court. Now, this bar of the jurisdiction of the court is no court except Supreme Court or High Court shall have jurisdiction to entertain any suit or proceeding in respect of anything done, action taken, orders made, directions, instructions, or guidelines issued by the central government, national authority, state government authority in pursuance to the power or in relation to functions of this act. So this act, this provision, section 71 has been specifically enacted, and the louder, the greater objective is that the authority who are working under the act may not be unnecessarily tinkered, and they may carry out their object of disaster management, mitigation, and providing relief as quickly as possible. And with this will not be complete until protection is given for the actions taken in good faith. Section 73 provides that protection. If an officer, no suit or prosecution of the proceeding shall lie in any court against the central government or the national authority or the state government or the state authority or the district authority or local authority or any officer or employee of the central government or national authority or the state government or the state authority or the district authority or local authority. That means top to bottom, everybody, all authorities. Any person working on behalf of such government or authority in respect of any work done or purported to have been done or intended to be done in good faith. So even if something is done in good faith, but if it results in some kind of offense, then the the officers are given protection under section 70, under section 73. Then there are skeleton provisions for making rules, because whenever an act is framed by a state legislature or a central legislature, it cannot operate in vacuum. Certain kind of mechanics, certain kind of mechanical provisions, that is rules, are required for day-to-day functioning of the bodies of the act, and therefore there are rules framed under the provision for framing rules under section 75, section 76, and section 77. So this is whole frame of the act. Now, just to understand this whole of the act, that, as I said, is a judgment which Honorable Apex Court has delivered just on 23rd of March 2021 in the matters of a small scale industrial manufacturer, which you can find on SCC Online. I have downloaded it from SCC Online. It is otherwise available also on the website of the Supreme Court. And thus after considering all parts of it, from paragraph 151, section 3 of the Act, section 7 of the Act, and then 156, in paragraph 156, they say, from the aforesaid, it can be said that the DMA Act, that is Disaster Management Act 2005, is a complete code in itself, and different functions and responsibilities by different authorities to be performed at different levels are provided as per section 35 and section 36 of the Act. It shall be the responsibility of the ministry or the department or the government of India to take measures necessary for prevention of the disaster, mitigation, then preparedness and capacity building, which shall include allocate funds for measures for preparation of disaster, mitigation, capacity building, and preparedness. So the Act operates in this mechanics, in this manner, and the working of the Epidemic Disease Act 1897 Act is also important. With this, I'll come to the last part of this my discussion, which is that is Uttarakhand Disaster Mitigation Management and Prevention Act 2005. Now, since a complete scheme is contained in 2005 Central Act, a complete national plan, district plan, state authorities, mechanism, how it is to be constituted. The 2005 Act, though, has been passed by the Uttarakhand legislature, and it is the powers are traceable under section 23, but for two reasons, that is section a specific provision under 2005 Act which gives overriding effect to section to the Central Act, and because of Article 254 of the Constitution of also, this Act cannot have any provision. This cannot any which is contrary or repugnant to the provisions of the Disaster Management Act 2005, and thus the authorities which are constituted under this Uttarakhand Disaster Mitigation Management and Reservation Act, Prevention Act 2005, will function considering current scenario of pandemic within the framework of Disaster Management Act 2005. But in any case of any other disaster, God forbid, any other disaster, the state of Uttarakhand is also equipped with a separate act which has been framed by its legislature. It has been duly notified, and a complete mechanism has been provided under the Act. Formation of authority, formation of plans, formation of data collection, then skeleton functions of authorities have been given in chapter 5 section 11 onward. Then commissioners, what are the duty of the commissioners of the division, how the disaster management and mitigation has to take place, and even for offenses also. It's a separate chapter, chapter 13, offense and penalties under section 29 has been given. And thus these three, largely speaking, these two acts, as of in the current scenario, are the laws which control the disaster management and enforcement of the various provisions regarding mitigation of the disaster and bringing the relief to the persons affected by this epidemic or any other disasters. So thank you very much. So this will be my submissions, and I'm of course here to reply any of your questions. So Mr.
Thank
Gandhi,
you. Thank you, dear sir. Thank you, Mr. Arvind. We are very thankful to you for your kind words. It was a very informative section, and the way you went into the details of all the sections, it was really informative. So we have got some questions from the audience as well, and some of the doubts that I have myself. So I'll be presenting question one by one to you, and I hope I'm audible to you as well.
yes, I'm out. Yes, you are audible, and I'll try to satisfy your queries.
Okay. So I'm actually what I'm wanting to tell to the students as well is that I am actually tailoring the questions that they seem appropriate to be presented in front of the speakers. So if anybody, like if there are some controversial questions or some political opinions, I would not be entertaining it. But if the questions has some substantive value, the questions will be presented to our dear speaker, and he'll try to answer in it the he'll try to answer it in the most best way possible. Okay. So sir, first of the first question that I have for you is that one problem that we have seen during the crisis was that we had an encounter with dearth of a legal mechanism. Only Epidemic Diseases Act and Disaster Management Act was available, but we know that government of India, they met for an important monsoon session in 2020. They were able to make some certain legislations. So do you think that government of India had missed an excellent opportunity to make an overhaul in the already existing act, or do you think that the act in itself was sufficient enough to deal with the crisis? And especially can just look into this in the purview of the second wave that we are facing today. That's the question, first question. Thank you. Sir, you're mute, I think. Sir, you're mute, I think. So kindly unmute yourself.
As I said, in this that in the 23rd of March 21 judgment, the apex court Supreme Court has considered whole of the mechanism of the act, and it has said that it is a complete code within itself. It provides all kinds of remedies at whatever way possible. Now, therefore, nothing can be said that at least I am not in a position to say that this after reading this 23rd of March 2021 judgment, that the act lacks anywhere. But the point is, there cannot be any denial of the fact that we were not ready for such kind of epidemics. Our courts were not ready, our systems were not ready. With the video conferencing mechanism, we were not trained, and the training at the grassroots level was obviously lacking. When sitting at the high court level, the expertise were lacking. Then at the grassroots level, we were lacking. But mm, um, our experience of last 8-9 months have shown that we have really excelled in the area. We have marched ahead, and in the despite continuation of second round of second wave of this, we will be able to provide legal assistance, and will be able to seek justice for our clients and everybody who is affected by any misconduct against him.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. So one of the other questions that I have received is that uh, EDA, like Epidemic Diseases Act and Disaster Management Act, both of these act increase the administrative authority. But we know that our bureaucracy has been accused of misusing these absolute power and targeting certain classes of citizen, especially those who have been marginalized. We were able to see a huge migration crisis that was happening, and during that time also we were able to see, one of the scathing thing that I was witnessing was when when one of the when health ministry or health secretaries came over on the screen while answering the questions, they were actually making some communalism, like communalizing the whole spread of the virus as well. So my point is that, do you think that administrative, like by the like the scheme that the act provides of excessive administrative authority being passed to the executives, do you think it is good for us, or do you think we need to have certain form of checks and balances upon the administrative authority as well?
Look, these epidemics and disasters will not are not going to continue for all time to come. And as the scheme of the act shows, that new officers have not been created, but the same structure, same administrative structure which is existing has been extended additional work. So new authorities have not been created. It is the collector of the same district will be in charge of the state level authority, and therefore new authorities have not been created. But then, in order to provide teeth to the functional bodies, some powers are to be given to them, and therefore these powers have been naturally given to them.
So, sir, one of the extension on the same question, like the question, like the one who has put the question, like this girl she's our student. She asked that, see, while we are seeing that the question that she puts is a very in vague terms, but I'll try to put up, like I'll try to plaster the question with certain things. So she says that, see, we were happening to see that while these administrative authorities are functioning perfectly and they are trying to extend all their supports toward the people and helping them, but we are also seeing excessive policing happening. We are not seeing, and that policing in itself is not uniform. We are seeing that in that times, poor are being challaned for 5,000, 1,000 for not wearing a mask, and in the same time, we are seeing rich class going out, they having not problem, they're having not facing any problem. We are seeing excess like functions stopping at one place, and at another place we are seeing that the whole thing is sidelined. So I am asked like the specific question about the policing form, the form of policing that we are seeing during the pandemic, and the form of I would say excessive control by policing that we are seeing. What would your comment be upon that?
These are true things, really true things. I have also seen. I'm also disturbed with this. But then we have to live with this. Whatever the act is given, this is the act. And misuse of power. Misuse of power can happen at any point of time by any reckless person. And if misuse of power occurs, then the person has to be taken to the logical end by starting proceedings against him.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So this question was put up by Samichi, and now one of the other questions that I have received from one of the students who is also an intern, who's trying to find his way in the practice, and also one of the practicing lawyers. The question they put forward is that we are seeing loss of jobs and loss of employment during this time, and we are also seeing huge number of people who are dying because of callousness of the nature, callousness of this administrative failures and all that, and oxygen shortages. So there, the question they put forward is that we haven't seen any form of economic impetus being given to the people. Okay, the poor, it was being said that the poor 1,000 rupees will be distributed, and our prime minister, he came forward and he said that food grains and all that thing will be given to people who are below poverty line. But the main question, these people, like the question that has been put to us is that what about the middle class? What about the people who are still trying to make in their life, who are still not that big, who are still having problems to, like, who are hand to mouth kind of people? So what about them? Do you think that in the codified way as well, one should look into this particular formula, because we have certain schemes regarding loan waivers, loan repayments, we have certain form of that. So do you think direct cash transfer schemes would have helped, or a provision regarding these economic impetus could have been implicated in this disaster management act as well?
What I want to say is this. Politically, many things can be said. This may be provided or that may be provided. I'm here because I'm a lawyer. The students are here because they are law students and advocates. Let us confine ourselves to legal issues. The provision says under law there is power, guidelines for minimum standard of relief and relief in loan repayment. It is for the government to decide what relief they have to grant. That much only I'll say.
Oh, yeah. See, this is what I have been telling us.
These are social and political issues.
This is
Considering
this is
law, will consider this only.
Yes, sir. This is what I've been telling our students as well. That see, we have our minimum areas of control. We can only interfere in certain ways. We can go to the court. We can demand for compensation, and we can demand for certain form of social schemes. But we cannot force the government to do it. If you really
As
want
a
to force
student
the
of law,
government,
absolutely. As
then
a
we have to
student
bring the
of
cheek
law,
by ourselves.
as a student of law, we should have to abide ourselves with the set of law, with the set of
Okay.
the remedies which have been given to us under section 12 and 13. Obviously we can go to the government, we can come to the court seeking these reliefs, but whether these relief should be granted or what relief should be granted will perhaps be beyond our discourse today.
Okay, sir. Sir, one of the questions that we have got from our from our students is that they are very much like they had a different set of opinions regarding the role of court. Like this, the question I have tried to frame up by the people who are sending me this question is that what would be your say on the judicial interventions that were made by high courts and Supreme Court at various point of time during this crisis. One side of the people like civil society, they put lots of praises for the courts that they have come out for the help of the people. The courts are open still, they are listening for all the pleas to be heard. And one of the other side of the civil society is very critical about the roles of court. They have been they are like casting exact, like they are making points that the courts could have been more active, the Supreme Court could have been more empathetic about certain cases when it was looking into certain things. So what would your say be upon that, that what is the role of courts that you see in handling this sort of a crisis, and how courts have come out in a, like, do you think they have come out in a good light, or do you think they could have done better?
Look, courts are seized upon the issues. Courts are still considering, and I hope public interest litigations are pending in Supreme Court. Public interest litigations are pending before High Court and other courts. Simultaneously, the administrative authorities are also working upon the disaster or pandemic of this magnitude. So it may take some time, but ultimately, I hope that uh, relief will be granted to all the quarters wherever it is required. Courts at least, law enforcement machineries at least, courts at least.
Sir, you have been muted. I think you have been muted by mistake. You have been muted by mistake.
All right. So I'll start with this once again. The point is that the public interest litigations are pending before the Supreme Court and the High Court, and they are seized upon the issues. Now, the public authorities with which the apex court and the high courts are dealing are also involved in the other performing other part of duties, that is the mitigation of the disaster, providing necessary help to the people, and therefore it is maybe that it's taking time, maybe the perception of the some of the people is that the it's not a timely action, but ultimately it will take time, but I hope that relief will be provided to every necessary quarter.
Okay, sir, one of the questions, like we are getting extensions on this particular question on role of the courts. I'll ask that last, like I'll ask that particular question in the last, but just a couple of questions and the last question. So we'll be taking last three questions. One of the questions has been put forward by Mr. Inder Negi. He asked that, he asked that, he says, a very good afternoon, that my question is, Disaster Management Act and other act don't seem fit to challenge the preparedness plan for controlling the pandemic like this. So do you think we need to have a new epidemic act Epidemic Diseases Act to deal with this sort of crisis? Because scientists are still not clear about if we'll face the third wave or if the new mutants or new viruses will be coming. So question, I think so, the question Inder Negi sir wants to ask is that do we need to have a new EDA or this would help? This is good enough.
Under
I
the
think
act,
so. This is a similar question.
under the act, the provisions are sufficient to control the situation. The point is whether our plan is our national plan or the state plan is ready for this. I don't think, and everybody, the feeling is, it's a gut feeling. It's a gut feeling that we were not prepared for this kind of pandemic, and therefore.
Okay, sir. Sir, last question. Last question, and then we'll be closing the session. So this was the only question that I was getting in regard to the constitutional clashes. So I've tried to compile this 3 questions in 1 question only. What we saw was that during the whole pandemic, during the second wave or just before the second wave of the pandemic, we were seeing election commission organizing elections in 5 of the states, and the panchayat elections were also organized in a couple of states, including Himachal Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh. And in looking at this, we saw High Court of Madras a couple of days back. They made a scathing remark on ECI, and they said that the ECI officers should be tried, there should be case should be brought upon against them because they are responsible for the spread of second wave. And for against this, ECI has already gone to the Supreme Court. And we also saw one of the like on the couple of seats where the election were contested in West Bengal, we see one of the candidates dying because of COVID, and the wife of the candidate has come out and filed a case of culpable homicide against the represent particular officer in ECI. So that my question is that while the election commission says that they are doing the or they are holding the elections after taking guidelines into account, and they are saying that it is an essential need for the democracy to get elections done, and we see on the other side high courts and supreme courts, they are advising to put down lockdowns. So here we see an institutional clash. One side we have an executive which is totally free. I won't say election commission is a part of government. Election commission is totally free, totally neutral body. And where we'll see, and on the other side we see the judiciary, being be it high court or supreme court, which is also not the part of government. So what would your say be upon this particular question? What would your say be upon this particular point, that this institutional clash that we are seeing, is it the end, or we are going to see more of these institutional clashes happening?
Look, Election Commission of India is a completely autonomous body. Even for that sake, the State Election Commission, as you know, that Panchayat elections are going on in the state of Uttar Pradesh. But even state election commissions are completely autonomous bodies. They have their own calendar, they have their own wisdom. In their wisdom,
Exactly.
they have these election proceedings, and government has nothing to do with it. Government cannot come. Election Commission could have taken into consideration the pandemic, but as of now, we are not equipped with the dates. When the dates for elections were fixed, with the second wave, they were able to see whether the second wave is coming. So I don't think that it's a institutional clash. It's a situation which has a reason merely because of a misfortune. Merely because the dates were fixed, and then our political parties and our voters, the public at large, was not really sensitized with the issue, and they were not they were. It was absolutely chaos working, and therefore the spread has ultimately occurred.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. I think so. We are done with the questions. Maybe there are a couple of questions that I was not able to ask because they had certain political tone, or they had certain, like, the question in itself, I found it a little incomplete. There are some questions that still are unanswered, and but we are left with little time. We have been here online for more than like 1.5 hours or something. So I am going to close this session now. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Arvind sir. It was an immense pleasure, and it was a big opportunity for us to get along with you, even through this online medium, and we were able to get your wise words and helpful guidance while dealing with this crisis. We are like these sort of sessions are very welcome, and our students are very thankful because they are able to get an interaction with a practicing lawyer. They can get the basic form of inspiration which has been largely missing because of this doom environment that has settled upon us. Because people
Thank
like
you.
you and people like Mr. Shakti, they are some sort of I would say glimmer of hope, because you guys still continue fighting for justice along with various other people. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for blessing us with this gracious presence. I'm thankful to you. Thank you, Mr. Shakti, as well. We'll be closing the session now. Thank you, audience. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for participating and making this an successful event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Gandhi. Thank you very much.
So thank you, everyone. We'll leave the session now. What I'll do is I'll put up my phone number. That is my WhatsApp number on the chat box. You guys can take my phone number from chat box. If there are any other questions, I'll be available through WhatsApp, and I'll try to answer these questions, and we'll try to deal with your things. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We can exit the session now. Thank you.